Hi, this is Micornus Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. We are continuing with the ministry of elders. The ministry of elders, and we are continuing with that. But today I want to embark on how are we to ordain elders? How are elders being ordained to become elders in the church? Now, I want us to look at the New Testament, clearly indicates that the early church uniquely set apart or appointed elders to the office. Now, the term normally used for the appointing of elders in the New Testament is what we call katistemi, which means to ordain. Katistemi, which is a Greek word that means to ordain. Now, the concept of ordination implies official recognition by the leadership of the church and the public as well. And the public announcement also setting men aside for special ministry. Now, ordination, as you can hear, is a concept of that implies official recognition. So, in other words, an elder must be recognized, number one, and that official recognition is followed by ordination, which is actually the leadership of the church is actually being set apart, being announced, officially recognized, and also being announced publicly to the church. So the church or the congregation would know that so and so has been appointed into eldership. So that was clear in the past. Now, in the book of 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14, Paul says to Timothy, "Do not neglect the spiritual gift within you, which was bestowed on you through prophetic utterances with the laying on of hands by the presbytery." Now, we're seeing now the laying of hands along with it, that when you are recognized, then you are announced. And as you are announced, in the New Testament, we see that Paul acknowledges that hands are laid upon the elders. Now, interestingly, the laying on of hands comes from the Old Testament as well. And that was in the sacrificial system. And I think you would remember that in the Old Testament, sacrifices were said. Laying of hands then developed as in the sacrificial system of the Old Testament, but we see it proceeding in the New Testament as well. And that's very important that we emphasize then that laying of hands then becomes very important based on this. In giving a sacrifice, the one offering it placed his hands on the sacrifice to show identification with it. So the laying on of hands became a means by which one could identify himself with another. So, in other words, as you were giving sacrifices in the Old Testament, one would actually put his hands upon his own sacrifice because that was identifying with that sacrifice. And the same then would mean that when you lay hands upon the elders as a pastor, you're basically identifying with them as well. And that's very, very important that we mention that. In the same way, the New Testament ordination ritual demonstrated solidarity between the elders and the one on whom the laying of hands is from. So meaning that the pastor or the leader that is actually laying hands upon them, that's appointing them, is identification between them. And they are in line with each other, particularly because they're following and driving the same vision together. Now, it was visible means of saying, we commend you to the ministry. We anoint you to the ministry to be part of what we are doing, to be part of the vision that we are carrying right now. And it was actually a way of identifying with the individual that we're going to work together. And that's very important. Now, we stand with you, we support you as well, that would mean, and we also affirm you right to function in the position of leadership in the church. So that was what it meant. And therefore, it is actually a ritual that is necessary to be done in the New Testament, in the church of today as well. So that elders are set apart, they are being actually announced to the church, and they are being ordained and laid hands upon, so that we identify with them. So Paul, however, wrote to warn Timothy do not lay hands upon, he was warning Timothy. He says, do not lay hands upon anyone too hastily, and thereby sharing responsibility for the sins of others. Keep yourself free from sin. Because what Paul meant here is that there are times where many people are being appointed into leadership before they're ready. And therefore, what you do, you basically authenticate their lifestyle. Because if they are known not to be living for God, but yet you ordain them into the ministry, you're basically associating with somebody whose reputation is damaged. And that's the reason why when we dealt with qualifications of an elder, we outline the issue that the elder must be above reproach. Now, in this case, if you are hastily laying hands upon people, appointing elders quickly, and that is why the Bible tells us in the lessons that we've passed, we've read, in the book of 1 Timothy chapter 3, in the lessons that we've taught in the past, it speaks about you must be above reproach as an elder, and you must be a person who's matured in the things of God, not a new convert at all. Because sometimes when you appoint new converts, they might not be matured enough, that their character may not be reputable outside. So when you lay hands upon them, Paul wants that you are actually taking responsibility of their sins. You're taking responsibility of their reputation because you are co-opting them into your leadership. And people look up to them, they relate to them, or they associate them with you as well. So Paul was very clear about it to Timothy. In the book of 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 22, I'm sure you know that. Now, that emphasizes the seriousness of statements of solidarity. In other words, if you lay hands on a man who is sinning and thereby ordaining him to the pastorate, you have entered into his sin. You have actually authenticated his sin. You have actually put a stamp on it and say you are proving it. So it is actually very, very dangerous to appoint people that you don't know well, to appoint people that are not living right, to appoint people that are not matured enough to be able to reflect or to be responsible to reflect the kingdom of God in them. If you don't want to be a participant in a sin of someone, be sure to seek the mind of the Lord in the ordination process as well. So that's very important. And we emphasize this because elders should be appointed and ordained, but the point here is that you must not just ordain people for the sake of ordaining them. You must be careful that you ordain the right people. Now, a church should consider a man for ordination only after he was proven or he proved himself suitable for the ministry of leadership during a resting period, and that must be during a period that has been given for a while. Don't rush into appointing somebody into leadership. Now, then the church may temper him for a time, during which is observed he has been observed and functioning in a limited position of delegation oversight. So in other words, before you appoint anybody into leadership of being an elder, appoint them into some delegated tasks initially that are minor in the church and see how committed they are and how they conduct themselves actually in the work of God before you appoint them to bigger role of becoming an elder. So delegate them, let them be in places where you can conduct oversight and be able also to observe them before you appoint them into the leadership of being an elder. If they demonstrate capability in leadership and loyalty to the message, the church can publicly acknowledge the man as one who is to be trusted in the services of leadership. Now, a congregation should have men in all phases of proving process as it looks towards its future as well. So there must be a pipeline. There must be a developmental stages that you develop people. There must be a way of putting people at a place whereby they should be recognized, but they must walk the process first. They must go through the journey first before you even appoint them into the high office of being an elder. Now, biblically, the recognized leaders of a church did the laying on of hands in that way. They identify themselves with those who were becoming leaders. But the process of identifying leaders may also have involved, it may also be becoming leaders, may also being involved the people or have involved the people. So in other words, it's not only the leader or the pastor or the visionary that actually appoints, might involve other people to find out the lifestyle of this particular individual from other people, because there are those that know the person better. So it is very important that you might need to consult those people and also make sure that you involve them before you appoint the people, the people into eldership. But the process of identifying them may actually also involve your observation as a leader, that you have observed this particular individual for a very long time. You have allocated them some tasks that they've done in flying colors. Their life is without reproach. And all that, when you have observed it clearly, you are able then to appoint somebody into leadership of being an elder. The book of Acts chapter 14 verse 23 says, when they had appointed elders for them in every church, having prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord, in whom they had believed. The word for appointed in that verse, it means what we call cheristomen, which literally means to choose by raising hands. To choose by raising hands. It is the same word used to describe how to choose also how the legislatures do actually when they are doing in government, when they voting. It also later came to men to appoint. Now I want to emphasize that when you're having a church that knows its own people, when you're having a church that is matured and knows the people well, they are able to raise hands to appoint someone. But in this case, whereby people may not know each other very well, the best way is actually to appoint someone. To appoint someone that you have known. To appoint someone that has developed and matured. To appoint someone that we know can become an elder. And an elder of note that will not be less above reproach. Not somebody who will embarrass the word or embarrass the kingdom of God. So it is very important then that we appoint people that we know very well. Some think that the use of cheritonem, which is the word that I've mentioned earlier, implies that the congregation took a vote by show of hands, but that is forcing the meaning of the word. The context of Acts chapter 14 verse 23 particularly indicates that only Barnabas and Paul, the antecedents of the pronoun they, were involved in choosing. So in other words, it must be other leaders that are choosing. It must not be the congregation. Because the congregation choosing by raising hands might actually be choosing their own friends. And that becomes dangerous sometimes because they choose their own friends even though they don't live right. We have seen congregations that are voting, that they may vote people that are not the right people in the kingdom. I want to end up here today. I hope this has actually clarified it. We will continue with the very same outlining on how do we then appoint elders and ordain them. We'll continue with the very same portion tomorrow, and I want you to follow us as we continue with this particular portion of teaching. But before I check out right now, I want to remind you of our Facebook page, Micornus Phokane, our Facebook page, Church Governance Solutions. Don't forget our TikTok account as well, which is Micornus Phokane. And don't forget our YouTube channel, Micornus Phokane, and Young Men Empowerment Forum as well. So please make sure that you subscribe to those pages, like them, and click notification buttons. You'll be notified when we've posted material of this kind, and the good Lord will bless you as you do so. Allow me to check out right here and say cheers for now.